Glad to have you back with us. And we're moving into elections a little bit, congressional elections, and not just congressional elections, but presidential elections too. And yesterday we looked at how people vote based on three different main characteristics. They vote based on party, they vote based on candidate appeal or image, and then they vote based on policy, or they try to vote based on policy. We'll talk about how easy that is to do in a separate video, but what I've got for you today is to talk about elections in the United States in the general sense. And also, you'll see in your folder there's a video about Michael Dukakis, the 1988 Democratic nominee for president, who was really in a good position to win that election, but he let some bad imaging, some bad ads get the best of him. It lasts about 13 minutes. This video is not going to last that long. So we're going to go through some basic stuff. Okay. First of all, we want to mention about elections in the United States. Elections are regularly scheduled. Okay. And we think, well, duh. Of course they're regularly scheduled. We don't, like, why would they not be regularly scheduled? There every 2 years for congressional elections, for House elections, and there's every 4 years for the presidential elections. And then we have state and local offices too. That's just the way it is. And that's the way it is for us. But that's not the way that it is in the rest of the world. We have regularly scheduled elections that do not get moved for anything. You notice that coronavirus this year happens and elections still go on. World wars happen and elections still go on. The American Civil War, the Great Depression, pick any catastrophic event and the elections still go on. They are regularly scheduled. They don't move. Elections are going to happen no matter what. We don't delay elections, we don't move up elections, and we don't call early elections. And once again, that's really not the norm everywhere. If you go to places like Europe, especially where they use a parliamentary system, like Great Britain, for instance, they can call special elections or what are called snap elections in some instances. They can also move elections, or depending on where you go, they can delay elections. But for us, elections are regularly scheduled. Now, to give you some context to this too, take a look at, if you can remember, you guys remember in 2012, Superstorm Sandy. If you remember, that hit in late October, and for us, I'll never forget it, we had a snow day on Halloween, which was insane. We've never had a snow day in October before. And it hit us pretty mildly, at least enough to cause one snow day. But in the city of New York and in New Jersey, you're talking about feet of snow. And the feet of snow that fell on New York and New Jersey was not cleared out of the way in time for everybody to get to the polls on election day. And that's tough luck, because they didn't have necessarily early voting or other mechanisms in place in 2012 to allow people to get out to vote. If you didn't early vote or use an absentee ballot in those states and you didn't get out to the polls that day, that's your fault, right? The elections have to move forward. Now, obviously, there's plenty of room for debate about how we change our election system, but our elections are regularly scheduled. Okay? Now, about our terms in office. And once again, this seems very strange here to foreigners, but for us, it's very normal. We have fixed term limits, excuse me, let me not say term limits, fixed terms. For example, if you're elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, you're going to serve a 2-year term. If you're elected President of the United States, you serve a 4-year term. If you're elected to the United States Senate, you serve a 6-year term. That number is fixed. And that's not necessarily true in other places for certain offices. For example, in Great Britain, I use them again, their prime minister. Their prime minister is picked from Parliament, and they can serve as long as Parliament's happy with them. If that person's doing a good job, they could be there for decades. Whereas if they're not doing a good job, they could lose their job the next day if people aren't confident in the direction they're taking them. So we use these fixed terms, and it's like, hey, you got to deal with this person for a couple of years at least, unless there's some wrongdoing, but by and large, that doesn't happen. Now, another feature of our elections, and I got to skip forward to show you a graphic here, in our United States Senate, we stagger terms. Okay, and here's what I mean by staggering terms. Don't mind those. You see here 3 different tracks. Out of our 100 senators, In any given election, you can only replace a third of them at a time. Now, in the House of Representatives, remember, House members, all 435 are up for re-election every 2 years. So you can get rid of, theoretically, we could dump the whole House in one election if we got annoyed with them. But you see here in the Senate, it's a little bit different. You see that one third of them, they are on track A, got elected in 2016, and their 6-year term will be up in 2022. And on track B, they got elected in 2018, and that's where Joe Manchin is. He's on track B, and his term will go to 2024. And then on track C, those people just got elected in 2020, and their term's going to go to 2026. That way, no matter what mood the country's in, you can only replace a third of the senators in any one election. Our other senator, Capito, Shelley Moore Capito, is on track C. So ultimately, the House, you could completely flip the entire House in one election, but in the Senate, you're still gonna, the most you can replace is a third of them. And the logic behind that, the idea behind that was that, remember, which of the two chambers of the House and the Senate, which one's supposed to be more representative or more focused on the will of the people? And that's the House members. So if they're not pleasing the people, you can dump them all at once. But remember, the Senate, they're supposed to be the wiser, more mature group that makes the good, informed decisions and not get pressured by the public. That way, even if the public's super angry at them, they can't replace all of them at once, and you still maintain some consistency in your leadership. That's why we stagger those terms in the Senate. Okay? Something else unique about our election system here, lame ducks. Lame ducks. A lame duck, and you have to love this graphic, by the way. Who doesn't love a lame duck? But anyway, you can see that duck's lame. He's on crutches. He's got a broken leg. A lame duck is a politician who knows they are not coming back to their office. They know that they're near the end of the line. Right now, Donald Trump knows he's a lame duck. Even if he doesn't realize it, he's a lame duck. He lost the election in November, and the new president doesn't come into office until January 20th. That means Trump has, from November till January 20th to do whatever it is that he feels like he needs to do as president. And lame ducks happen all the time. Several members of Congress got voted out by their home state or their home district in 2020. And they are just hanging around until January the 3rd, which incidentally was Sunday, and a new Congress took place. Right? For the President of the United States, it's not till January 20th, so Trump still has a couple weeks left. Technically, I believe he has one fortnight. Jokes aside. All right, anyway, the terms that they have, those lame ducks, they can be a problem. Because think about this for a second. What would you do if you knew you only had 2 months to live? Right? You'd live it up. You'd do all the things you never got to do. The pressure's off now. You know you're at the end of the line. Now, think about a politician who knows they only have 2 months left in their political life. They might start saying and doing things that they've always wanted to say or do. In some ways, being a lame duck is a little bit freeing. Now, it could be causing problems in legislation, though, because what if this lame duck Congress that had just expired or a lame duck president does something that, say, I don't know, might gather some questions? For example, President Trump pardoned some people, and presidents do have the ability to pardon or release people from criminal punishment. He pardoned some people that were guilty of crimes. And people felt like they shouldn't get pardoned, including some people who worked for his presidential campaign in 2016. All right. Now, some people have made some proposals about the way we do our congressional terms. Some individuals want to see term limits. They want to see members of the House and Senate not be able to be there for forever and ever. And we'll talk about that later when we talk about Congress, so you don't have to worry about that right now. Okay. Something else that's unique in our elections, this is a reminder of something we talked about earlier, the winner-take-all system. And remember, our elections work on that principle that whoever gets the most votes wins the seat. Okay? And our winner-take-all system, that election occurs in what we call single-member districts. A single member district, and it sounds like a long, complicated term, but it's really not. Just think of a single member or a single person who represents an entire district of people. Okay? You couldn't see me, but I was actually just making a big motion like one giant district. Here's an example. Carol Miller in the House of Representatives represents the southern third of West Virginia. She's a single member who represents one entire district. House District 2, Alex Mooney represents that entire district. He's a single member who represents the entire district. And David McKinley represents the 1st District. Right? When it comes to Senate seats, Joe Manchin is still a single member district winner. He won the entire state of West Virginia. Everybody in West Virginia gets to vote on senators. Same with Shelley Moore Capito, a single member, a single person who is voted upon to represent the entire district. Now, remember, that's different than a lot of European nations. They use proportional representation, where, remember, they vote for a political party, and then based on the percentage of votes they get, that's the percentage of seats they get in Parliament. Over in Europe, you don't represent like a district like we do. They just represent everybody. Okay? This video, real quick and straightforward. Make sure you watch the video on Michael Dukakis and how image matters. Hope you guys are doing okay.